The seduction of control over the Force, over life itself, often begins with a quieter, more intellectual temptation, the hunger to know what's forbidden. We tell ourselves knowledge is neutral, that understanding the dark side will only make us stronger against it. But the Force does not separate knowledge from emotion, it weaves them together. So the act of studying forbidden lore is not just an intellectual exercise, it is a spiritual one. To delve into ancient Sith holocrons, to handle artifacts steeped in darkness, to pore over texts the Jedi locked away for centuries, is to let the dark side's logic seep into your bones. It does not roar at you to turn evil. It whispers, "This makes sense. They had a point. The Jedi were wrong to fear this." And slowly, imperceptibly, your perspective bends until the line between defense and complicity, between understanding and empathy, fades away. Consider the case of Master Ilara Voss, a Jedi archivist who dedicated her life to preserving the Order's history, until she stumbled upon a hidden section of the Jedi Temple archives in 27 BBY. The archives, overseen by Jocasta Nu, were supposed to hold all Jedi knowledge, but Ilara found a door sealed with a Force barrier, its surface etched with warnings. Only the Council may pass. Knowledge here corrupts. Ilara was not curious out of greed. She was curious out of fear. The Clone Wars had just begun, and separatist forces were deploying Sith-inspired tactics, force-wielding mercenaries, toxin weapons that targeted midi-chlorians. She thought, if I understand what we're fighting, I can help stop it. Using her authority as an archivist, she convinced Nu to let her study the sealed texts for the war effort. What she found inside changed her. The hidden archives held holocrons of Darth Revan, the fallen Jedi who once ruled the galaxy, and Darth Bane, the architect of the Rule of Two. At first, Ilara read them with disgust. Revan's justification for conquering the Outer Rim, order requires sacrifice, Bane's rant against Jedi weakness, compassion is a chain. But as the war dragged on, as she watched clone troopers die by the thousands, as the Jedi Council debated strategy while Outer Rim villages burned, she began to hear the logic in their words. Revan's holocron whispered, "The Jedi let the galaxy fall into chaos because they feared power. You do not have to fear it." Bane's text argued, "The Jedi's obsession with balance makes them passive. The dark side acts. It fixes things." Ilara told herself she was just learning the enemy. She did not realize she was learning to agree with them. She began to question the Council's decisions, to argue that the Jedi should use Sith methods to end the war faster, to tap into anger to strengthen their attacks, to use fear to cow separatist worlds. When Nu confronted her, Ilara snapped, "You'd rather let the galaxy burn than admit the Jedi were wrong to hide this." She left the temple that night, taking a Sith holocron with her. Last reports placed her on Malachor, a planet steeped in dark side energy, teaching a group of Force sensitives that the Jedi's fear of knowledge is their greatest sin. Ilara did not set out to betray the Order. She set out to protect it. But the act of studying forbidden lore had rewritten her understanding of right and wrong, until protecting the galaxy meant embracing the very darkness she once swore to fight. Ancient Sith artifacts are even more insidious, for they carry the dark side's energy like a virus. Take the Sith amulet of Darth Nihilus, a relic that drained the life force of those who touched it. In The Clone Wars Season 6, a group of Jedi younglings found the amulet on a mission to Tatooine, mistaking it for a harmless trinket. At first, nothing seemed wrong, until the younglings began to bicker, then fight, then lash out at their master. The amulet did not possess them. It amplified them. Their frustration at being stuck on a desert planet, their jealousy of peers who were chosen for important missions, their fear of failing the Order. By the time the Jedi recovered the amulet, one youngling had nearly stabbed another with a training saber, screaming, "You always get to be first." The amulet's power was not in forcing evil. It was in making the younglings' darkest emotions feel valid, like they had a right to be angry, to lash out, to take what they wanted. This is the danger of forbidden artifacts. They do not change you. They reveal the parts of you you've hidden, and then make you proud of those parts. The most unsettling corruption, though, comes not from artifacts or holocrons, but from understanding the dark side too deeply. When you study the Sith's histories, not just their crimes, but their motivations, you cannot help but see their humanity. Darth Maul was a child when Palpatine took him, raised in darkness because he knew no other life. Darth Vader was a slave who wanted to protect his family, twisted by fear and manipulation. Even Darth Sidious was a young Jedi Padawan once, rejected by the Council for his arrogance, driven to the dark side by a desire to prove himself. To understand these truths is not a sin, but to let that understanding turn to empathy, to think, I would have done the same if I'd been in their shoes, is to cross a line. I saw this in Kale, a Jedi historian who wrote a thesis on the Sith's tragic origins during the Clone Wars. Kale argued that the Sith were not evil, but failed idealists, driven to darkness by the Jedi's rigidity. At first his work was dismissed as radical, but as the war worsened, more Jedi began to read it, including Alara Voss. Kale did not become a Sith, but he stopped seeing the Sith as enemies. He started seeing them as victims, and the Jedi as complicit in their fall. When Order 66 came, he did not fight back. He surrendered, telling the clones, the Jedi and the Sith are just two sides of the same coin. I don't want to be part either. He was executed anyway. Kale's mistake was not in seeking understanding. It was in letting that understanding erase his moral compass until he could no longer tell the difference between a victim and a tyrant, between tragedy and cruelty. Forbidden lore is not dangerous because it contains evil information. It is dangerous because it teaches you to speak the dark side's language. It makes you see the galaxy through its eyes, where power is the only virtue, where compassion is a weakness, where the ends always justify the means. The Jedi locked away these texts, not because they feared knowledge, but because they feared this transformation, because they knew that to understand the dark side too deeply is to start thinking like it. This is the corruption of knowledge. It does not make you evil. It makes you reasonable. It makes you explain away the dark side's crimes, justify its methods, empathize with its practitioners, until you no longer feel the need to fight it. You become a bystander, then an apologist, then a participant, all while telling yourself you're just being realistic. The dark side does not need to force you to turn. It just needs to teach you to see its logic. And once you do, you'll turn yourself. The corruption of knowledge, of forbidden holocrons and Sith artifacts, preys on the mind. But there is a darker, more intimate corruption that preys on the heart, the perversion of empathy. We think of compassion as a shield against the dark side, as the Jedi's greatest virtue next to wisdom. But empathy, when unfiltered, when untethered to boundaries, becomes a weapon not against darkness, but for it. To absorb the suffering of others without grounding, without the wisdom to separate their pain from your own, is to let that pain twist you from the inside out. You start by wanting to heal. You end by wanting to destroy, because destruction feels like the only way to silence the screaming in your head. This is not the rage of Anakin Skywalker or the greed of Palpatine. This is the tragedy of good intentions turned to rot, compassion without balance, empathy without limits. Consider Jedi Master Serra Voss, a healer and diplomat stationed on Felucia during the Clone Wars. Serra was not just skilled in force healing, she was gifted in empathy. She could feel the pain of others as if it were her own, the ache of a clone's broken leg, the terror of a Twi'lek child hiding from droids, the grief of a farmer who'd lost his family. The Jedi Council praised her for it, calling her a bridge between the Order and the suffering. But Serra did not just understand pain, she absorbed it. She would sit with refugees for hours, holding their hands, letting their tears and screams seep into her through the Force. She told herself it was part of healing, that to help, she must first feel. But the pain did not fade when the refugees left. It lingered, a weight in her chest, a noise in her head. She began to sleep poorly, dreaming of Felucia's burning jungles and the faces of the dead. She stopped eating, too distracted by the voices of suffering she could still hear, even in the quiet of her quarters. At first she turned to the Jedi Code for solace. She meditated, repeating Yoda's words, "Fear is the path to the dark side." Fear leads to anger, but the pain was not fear, it was grief and guilt and a desperate longing to fix what she could not. The code did not help, so she began to push her empathy further, using the Force to take pain from others entirely. She would lay her hands on a wounded clone and pull his agony into herself, leaving him numb but healed. She would find a grieving mother and siphon her sorrow, leaving her empty but calm. The refugees called her a saint. Serra called it mercy. But the more pain she took, the more she changed. She grew cold, her once warm smile tight and forced. She snapped at her Padawan for wasting time on training when people were dying. She began to see the Clone Wars not as a conflict to resolve, but as a cancer to cut out, even if that meant cutting out the cancerous people who caused it. The slippery slope began with a separatist commander who'd ordered a strike on a Felucian village, killing dozens of children. When the Republic captured him, Serra was sent to interrogate him. She did not ask questions. She reached into his mind through the Force and pulled out every moment of cruelty he'd ever committed, every order he'd given, every life he'd ended, and forced him to feel it, multiplied 100 times. The commander screamed, his mind breaking under the weight of his own guilt. Sarah watched, her face blank. "Now you know," she said. "Now you feel what they felt." But when she left the interrogation room, she did not feel justice. She felt a thrill, a quiet, terrible satisfaction. For the first time in months, the noise in her head had gone quiet. That thrill led to more. She began targeting separatist officials, then corrupt Republic senators who profited from the war, then even Jedi who did not care enough, who spent more time in the temple than on the front lines. She did not kill them. She broke them, using the Force to flood their minds with the pain of the people they'd failed. The Jedi Council noticed, of course. Master Mace Windu confronted her on Coruscant, his voice sharp with concern. "Sarah, this is not the Jedi way. You are not healing, you are punishing." Sarah laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "Healing takes too long. Punishment stops the pain. Is that not what we're supposed to do? Stop the pain?" When Windu tried to reason with her, she lashed out, sending him flying with a wave of Force energy, dark energy, tinged with the suffering she'd absorbed. "You do not understand," she shouted. "You have never felt it. You have never listened." They arrested her, of course, locked her in a cell in the temple, away from the pain she'd grown addicted to. But the damage was done. Sarah Voss did not become a Sith Lord. She did not pick up a red lightsaber. She became something quieter, a prisoner of her own compassion, twisted into a being who believed the only way to save the galaxy was to make everyone else feel its pain. She was a reminder that empathy, when stripped of wisdom and boundaries, is not a virtue. It is a poison. This is the perversion of empathy. It does not turn you evil. It turns you desperate. You start by carrying one person's pain, then 10, then 100, until you can no longer tell where their suffering ends and yours begins. You grow convinced that the only way to stop the noise is to eliminate the source of the pain permanently. You do not see yourself as a villain. You see yourself as a savior, even as you destroy the very people you once swore to protect. The Jedi teach balance, not to suppress compassion, but to protect it. They teach that to care deeply is a strength, but to care without limits is a weakness. Yoda once said, "Compassion is not weakness, but blind compassion is folly." Sarah Voss forgot that. She thought caring meant carrying the world alone. She thought healing meant erasing pain, not helping others bear it. And in that forgetting, she became the very thing she feared, a cause of suffering, not a cure. Empathy is not the enemy. The enemy is the lie that empathy requires self-destruction, that to love the world, you must let it break you. The dark side does not just feed on anger and greed. It feeds on our best intentions, twisting them into something unrecognizable. It tells you that your compassion is not enough, that you must do more, be more, take more, until there is nothing left of you but the pain you tried to save others from. And that, in the end, is the cruelest corruption of all. The perversion of empathy teaches us that the dark side's corruption can wear the face of compassion, quiet, intimate, and impossible to see until it's too late. But there is another form of corruption, even more elusive, that does not come from within. It comes from without, from entities and locations that feed on the Force, not with rage or greed, but with a silent, symbiotic hunger. These are not Sith Lords or dark side artifacts glowing with malice. They are creatures that blend into jungles, planets that hum with a twisted energy, and beings that siphon the Force so gently, you don't notice it's gone until you're empty. This is symbiotic parasitism, the Force's version of a slow poison, one that alters your connection not with a roar, but with a whisper. And it reveals a truth even the Jedi struggle to accept. The Force is not just a tool to be wielded, but a living, breathing system, one that can be fed upon, warped, and drained by the very world it binds. Consider the Ysalamiri, small, lizard-like creatures native to the planet Merca. To the untrained eye, they are harmless. They cling to trees, feed on insects, and emit a soft, melodic chirp. But Ysalamiri do something no other known creature can. They create a Force null, bubble around themselves, a zone where the Force cannot penetrate. Jedi who venture near Merca's jungles describe it as a kind of blindness. Suddenly, the hum of the Force fades, their senses dull, and even simple tricks, like moving a stone with their mind, feel impossible. At first, it's a novelty. But prolonged exposure does more than just block the Force. It erodes it. During the Clone Wars, a Jedi scouting team was stranded on Merca for 3 weeks, surviving on Ysalamiri-infested terrain. When they were rescued, they were changed. Master Kale, the team's leader, could no longer sense the Force in others. Padawan Lyra forgot how to meditate, her mind now a blank, quiet space where the Force once flowed. The Ysalamiri did not attack them. They simply existed, and their existence fed on the Force around them like a plant absorbing sunlight. The scouting team thought they were just out of practice when they returned to the temple, but the damage was permanent. Kale left the Order, unable to bear the emptiness where his connection once was. Lyra became a farmer, never again touching a lightsaber. The Salamiri's parasitism was not malicious. It was instinct. But instinct, when paired with the Force's fragility, can corrupt just as thoroughly as evil intent. Even more dangerous are creatures that do not just block the Force, but consume it, like the Vaunskas, predatory beasts from the same planet, Merca. Vaunskas hunt using the Force. They can track a Force, sensitive across miles, their noses twitching at the scent of midi-chlorians. But they do not kill for food alone. They feed on the Force itself, latching onto their prey with needle-sharp fangs and siphoning their connection bit by bit. A Jedi attacked by a Vaunska does not just feel pain, they feel a cold, spreading emptiness, as if the Force is being pulled out of them through their veins. During the Galactic Civil War, a rebel team encountered a Vaunska on a mission to Mirka. The creature latched onto Leia Organa, who was just beginning to explore her Force sensitivity. By the time the team freed her, Leia could no longer sense Luke. Her connection to her brother, once a bright, constant thread, was gone. It took months of meditation to rebuild it, and even then, it was never quite the same. The Vaunska did not care about Leia's ideals or her role in the rebellion. It cared only about feeding. But its hunger left a scar, a reminder that the Force is not just a source of power, but of vulnerability. To be Force-sensitive is to be prey, whether to Sith or to creatures that see your connection as a meal. Locations, too, can be parasitic. Planets where the Force is warped into a drain, pulling life and light into a bottomless pit. The most infamous is Malachor Vive, a world scarred by an ancient Sith battle. The Traius core, a massive structure at Malachor's heart, does not just radiate dark side energy, it leaches the Force from everything around it. Jedi who visit Malachor describe a feeling of being pulled apart. Their compassion turns to anger, their hope to despair, and their connection to the Force frays into a tangled mess. During the Clone Wars, Ahsoka Tano and Anakin Skywalker traveled to Malachor to stop a Sith holocron from falling into Separatist hands. While there, Anakin began to hear voices, whispers of his future as Darth Vader lies about Padme's death. He thought it was the Sith's doing, but it was Malachor itself. The planet's parasitic Force was amplifying his fears, feeding on his doubt, and pushing him closer to the dark side. Ahsoka, too, felt it, her resolve wavering, her trust in Anakin slipping. They left Malachor alive, but the planet's mark remained. Anakin's fear of loss grew sharper, and Ahsoka's doubt in the Jedi Order deepened. Malachor did not force them to turn. It simply fed on the parts of them that were already vulnerable, and in doing so, pushed them closer to corruption. These entities and locations reveal the Force's true complexity. It is not just a binary of light and dark, but a web of connections, hungry and fragile, that binds all life. The Ysalamiri, Vaunskas, and Malachor V do not align with the Sith or the Jedi. They exist outside of morality, driven by instinct or the scars of ancient violence. But their impact is just as corrupting, because they remind us that the Force is not ours to control. It is a shared resource, one that can be drained, warped, or destroyed by forces we barely understand. The Jedi teach vigilance against the dark side, but they often forget to teach vigilance against the unknown. They train to fight Sith Lords and resist anger, but not to recognize when a lizard's chirp or a planet's hum is slowly eroding their connection. This is the lesson of symbiotic parasitism. The Force's greatest danger is not its darkness, but its fragility. To be Force-sensitive is to be part of a system that is both beautiful and vulnerable, a system that can be fed upon by the very world it sustains. In the end, these creatures and planets are not enemies. They are mirrors. They reflect the Force's true nature, interconnected, hungry, and ever-changing. They remind us that vigilance is not just about fighting evil. It is about respecting the Force, not as a tool, but as a living thing. And it is about knowing that corruption can come, not from a red lightsaber or a Sith's lie, but from a quiet, unseen hunger, one that waits, patient and silent, in the shadows of the galaxy.